the Honorable Datuk Sri Icgmm, Foreign Minister of Malaysia, and Datin Sri Siti Rubiah, Excellencies, distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen. It is my distinct pleasure and honor to introduce the subject as well as our very distinguished speaker. The topic, of course, is Malaysia's foreign policy, moderation in action. It is the foreign policy of a nation that emerged from colonialism hardly 6 decades ago in a rather volatile and unstable regional environment. It is the foreign policy of a nation rich in ethnic, religious, and cultural diversity that today has become a high human development, high-income country, and that aspires to be fully developed by the next decade. Malaysia, I think, has been a constructive force for moderation in the pursuit of regional and international peace and prosperity. And who best to speak on this important subject than our own very distinguished Foreign Minister, the Honorable Datuk Sri Icgmm. He comes from Sabah, and for those who know Sabah, they will agree with me that the state personifies all the positive values and elements of moderation: inclusiveness, engagement, celebration of diversity, tolerance, harmony. Datuk Sri Icgmm is a graduate in philosophy, economics, and law from Buckingham University, and I understand that even in his younger days as a student in the UK, he was an activist, a student activist. I am also made to understand that he spoke no less than at least 2 times at Hyde Park, so, so that prepares him very well for everything, for life. He was appointed Deputy Minister of the Ministry of Primary Industries and later Deputy Minister of the Ministry of Plantation Industries and Commodities before being appointed the Minister of Foreign Affairs in April 2009. Ladies and gentlemen, let me join me in welcoming the Honorable Datuk Sri Icgmm.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, and a very good afternoon. Yang berbahagia, Tan Sri Datuk Sri Muhammad Johar Hassan, Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. It gives me great pleasure to address you today and be part of this momentous conference. It was slightly more than a year ago that the Prime Minister put forward the idea of building global movements of the moderates. A simple idea to fight all forms of extremism through the practice of moderation. Then, and just this morning, he made a clarion call for all the moderates to step forth, reclaim center stage, and fight the extremists. The support for the global movement of the moderates has grown exponentially. For those of us who have been part of this since its inception, nothing gives us greater pleasure than its realization. Being part of the transformations, I take great pride in it, and I thank everyone for their support and commitment to this cause. I believe that we all agree that the timing of this conference is opportune. Year in and year out, extremists thrive on the fear of others, and I believe that at the start of the year 2012, this conference sends a signal to all extremists out there that a silent majority of what I call the global moderates are beginning to come together to fight and marginalize the extremists. I'm sure that many of us here are aware of what is described by the writer Malcolm Gladwell as a tipping point, where something can spread through the population so aggressively. I'm afraid we have seen this with the widespread of extremism all over the world. It is now time for us to strive for a positive tipping point and start, in his own words, positive epidemics of our own to effect change, moderations, and see the decline of extremism. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, from the beginning of civilization and through its development, war seemed to be the way of the world, and Leo Tolstoy once said, "Men are so accustomed to maintaining external order by violence that they cannot conceive of life being possible without violence." The devastation caused by World War I and II is a painful reminder that extreme measures such as the use of force and violence will never lead to desirable results or solutions. To prevent such calamitous events, the United Nations was established. The world decided for a moderate way of dealing with international relations, particularly conflicts and disputes, through peaceful settlement and refrain from the use of force. Pessimists may argue that despite this, conflict, disputes and violence are unavoidable, inherent as it is in human nature. Yes, they may be true, but the manner in which we choose to resolve it, through negotiations and dialogue, is what makes the difference. We choose the middle path, the path of moderation, which is the better part of human nature. Hence, in choosing moderations of extremism, we are choosing the better part of our nature and not the worst. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, ever since independence, Malaysia has worked to achieve and maintain the very same objective espoused at our admissions as a member of the United Nations, that of friendly relations with all friendly nations. We have done so through the crafting of foreign policy geared towards this specific end, while at the same time ensuring that our national interest is served. Moderation has been the key characteristics defining our policies, be it domestic or foreign, encompassing social, political, and also economic aspects. In layman's terms, being moderate in the promotion of our foreign policy means that we are not ruled by our emotion, no matter how strong they may be. We emphasize objectivity and strive for the collective good of all. Being motivated by emotion, such as anger, is a surefire way of committing ourselves to the course of action that not only we may regret, but could possibly result in the endangerment of life of innocent people. One of history's most valuable lessons is that fighting violence with violence will only lead to vicious cycle, culminating in wanton death and destructions. That is why Malaysia's foreign policy is premised on three main considerations. One, our policy must be credible, and that it must be able to generate the trust and confidence of other nations. This also means that in order to fulfill this criteria, the policy must be well thought out and reasoned. Two, our policy must be an enlightened policy, factoring in all possible considerations before strategies are formulated, making informed decisions through an enlightened policy, and will ensure respect and admiration for the country and its people. And three, consistency and coherence, which will assure others that Malaysia is reliable as an international partner within the global community. All of these three main considerations of which Malaysia's foreign policy is based on is strengthened and given effect by the establishment of the rule of law as the basis of international relations. And for this reason, the promotions and adherence to international law has been the basis of Malaysia's foreign policy since independence. I must emphasize that the development of the rule of law in international relations is a critical element of promoting moderations. There are two sides of the same coin and mutually reinforce one another. And this is because laws regulate action. Laws temper extremist behavior, as at then as a developed country that is strategically vulnerable and which relies on the wider world for prosperity and survival. Malaysia has no choice but to rely on moderation and a twin sister, the rule of law. In short, the way in which Malaysia conducts business international relations today, through the application of rules, constructive engagement, negotiation, dialogue, and extensive discussions, are all tools of moderation, which I believe have been tried and tested and successful over the years. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, we cannot expect others to be tolerant and accepting if we do not do the same for others. There lies the strength of Malaysian society, a multiracial, multi-religious, multicultural and democratic society that has benefited from mutual respect and positive interactions between the various communities within. This is the very same foundational values that dictate relations with our neighbors. I acknowledge we are not without our differences and problems, whether within our communities or within our neighbors, but the point of the matter is we resolve them amicably without resorting to extreme measures. Our society, like many others, are not reactive to provocations, internally or externally, no matter what our personal sentiments are over issues. We choose to speak through well-established democratic process instead of resorting to extremism and violence. This is the mark of moderation in action. This is the nature of our bilateral diplomacy, and we will continue to uphold and defend this in times to come, because it has worked for us and for all our neighbors. Reiterating what I had said earlier, the value of practice of moderation we share with our neighboring societies help us avert possible disastrous outcome in many situations. This common value in practice, in fact, is a hallmark of success of a regional grouping, the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, or ASEAN. ASEAN's policy of non-interference is designed to promote trust and confidence within the grouping itself. For instance, when Myanmar was criticized by the international community, ASEAN stood by it, refusing to be drawn into the shame and blame game. Instead, we began a process of constructive engagement, drawing them into the fold rather than alienating them. It was quite a criticized approach, but for us it was the right approach, the moderate approach for which we are now beginning to see promising results. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, moderation is the same value we demonstrate in our efforts to combat terrorism. Combating terrorism calls for more concerted effort from the international community. However, this does not mean resorting to extreme measures like fighting fire with fire in the war on terror. On the same note, prejudice such as condemning terrorist acts on Muslim countries while justifying such acts on Western countries is the type of thinking which I personally find extreme and will poison the minds of people. Any act of terror and violence against civilian populations anywhere in the world should not be condoned. Yet today, we stand witness to the rise in racist and religiously motivated violence, as well as violence motivated by prejudices. The international community has witnessed anti-Muslim violence propagated by Islamophobia, the stereotyping and generalizations of Muslims, and the attachment of collective responsibility to all Muslims for acts of terrorism. We have witnessed attacks on people of other faith and religions because of racism and intolerance. This development clearly contravenes the 2001 Durban Declarations and Program of Action. It states that racism racial discrimination, xenophobia, and related intolerance are an obstacle to friendly relations among peoples and nations, and among the root causes of many internal and armed conflicts, including international armed conflicts. The enormity and the gravity of the acts committed by extremists should have actually jolted the silent majority into action a long time ago. When the New York's World Trade Center was destroyed in 2001, the extremists rejoiced. But not only because they had managed to bring down the World Trade Center, or nor was it because they had managed to infiltrate a superpower. They rejoiced because they had managed to capture the world's attention. They created crippling fear among the world's population. They were now calling the shots. They were now dictating what the world should be focusing on. And above all, they were enacting chaos by causing those enraged and hatred to sink to their level. The next 10 years after 2001 proved to be a decade of hijacked global agenda, an agenda of terror. Series of attacks with tragic consequences followed. Bali was targeted by extremists not once, but twice. In 2004, acts of terror were committed in Madrid, and in 2005, in London. And subsequently, the world witnessed attacks on Mumbai in 2008 and also 2011. Last year, Norway and Nigeria fell victim to unscrupulous acts of terrorism. The solution to this problem is not taking up arms, which only result in the exacerbations of the situation. We have to counter the basis of extremist ideology, to counter it from being translated into violent acts, and we can do so by preaching and practicing moderation. Standing united, the symphony of our voices will not only be heard, but will drown the cacophony of extremists. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, we advocate moderation because it's something which we ourselves ascribe to as a nation. We see that through the policies of moderation, of balancing all aspects of life, be it economic, financial, or social, during the building of this nation, we have managed to ensure the success of the country and guarantee the well-being of all people. As a nation, Malaysia cannot afford to be extremist. Our multicultural, multi-religious, and multi-racial makeup make it imperative that moderation is practiced in Malaysia. And in an age driven and defined by extremism, trading the path of moderation often means taking the path of courage. Being moderate does not mean that we lack passion, as what the Prime Minister addressed this morning, or we lack drive, or ambition. It does not mean that we do not get fired up by the sense of injustice. Neither does being moderate mean we cease to think outside the box. Walking the middle path means that we end up with innovative ways of striking a balance between two extremes. I spoke about striking a balance between two extremes. In the international arena, Malaysia and its diplomats have always been known what we call honest brokers. Those who would propose a course of action that would lead to a win-win situation, thereby avoiding the extreme ends. And we do this not because we seek the glory in the solving of a problem, but because we genuinely want to see a workable solution for the good of all. On the issue of human rights, for instance, few experts will disagree that the area of right is littered with caveats and provisos. The freedom of speech, for example, can be exercised only insofar as it does not impinge upon the rights of others, or create a situation in which the existence of the whole community is put in jeopardy. For example, the freedom of assembly must also be balanced with the considerations for public order and to the livelihood of the man in the street. This is why, despite that seemingly absolutist way of which the Universal Declarations of Human Rights is presented, each drafters saw the need to insert what was later to become Article 29 of the Declarations, allowing limitation to be made by each and every democratic society. This is where moderation is the key. One side would be to advocate total freedom, and in so doing condemn us to Hobbes' state of nature, where every man is against every man, and a state of war. The other side would have advocated full communal rights, and in so doing negate those individual rights that gives a sense of self-worth. The path of moderation that Malaysia has taken in respect of this area is one which many countries share. It is not easy being moderate, but we know that this is the path which is right for us, and we will continue to pursue it as we see it best. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, Victor Hugo said, "All the forces in the world are not as powerful as an idea whose time has come." This idea is one of those whose time has arrived. I'm confident that global moderates are far more numerous than it would seem. Indeed, many countries would assert that moderation is also a principle of their own foreign policy. It is therefore opportune for us, whom I previously called the global moderates, to now ensure that we continuously garner support and strength for our cause. With this, we can achieve peace and prosperity, not only for a handful of people or for a smattering of nations, but for all and without distinction. The time has come for us to marshal our collective will in favor and move forward in the marginalization of extremism. Thank you very much.